Greetings, everybody. Here we go into week 2. Thank you for another really good class. This video is going to provide some introduction into your content for this week. I'm going to take myself out of the picture so you can see these slides without any clutter. Here's what's in this particular video. A little bit about the learning theorists and their theories, some approaches to teaching ESL to adults. This is what you'll read in Parrish. Program design, instructional setting, and I'm going to demonstrate 3 online platforms today, the Wiki, Padlets, and Screencast-O-Matic. This particular video is being recorded in Screencast-O-Matic. I'm using my PowerPoint to record, but you don't have to. You can simply do a recording of you. And with the free version of this, screencast-o-matic.com, with the free version you can record up to 15 minutes. So you could record little bits of a lesson for students to watch. So let's look at some of these early theorists. The early ones were the behaviorists, people like Pavlov, Skinner, and Thorndike, who believed that learning is completely predictable because all it is a response to stimuli. We now know this is not the case, that learned behavior or conditioned response is not the same as learning something. So there were other theorists and researchers and educators who didn't agree with the behaviorists, and they went off and did their own thing, and those were the cognitivists, people like Jean Piaget, Benjamin Bloom, Jerome Bruner, who believed, no, really, learning is very sequential, that you've got to do this first, you've got to remember first, then you can understand, then you can apply it and analyze it and evaluate it, and then you can create it. This drove education in the U.S. for a long time, but we also know this is not how we learn. It's not that sequential. It's much more holistic. But it was a step forward, right? And some of these cognitivists, Bruner and Piaget included, were not entirely satisfied with their cognitivism, so they started thinking in terms of constructivism, that we construct meaning based on what we know, our abilities to analyze, and our ability to critique, that reasoning is the most powerful driving force behind learning. There have been some other theories over time. The humanists come to mind with William Glasser and Abraham Maslow. They looked at the learner very holistically, that humans control their destinies, people are inherently good and will strive for a better world, people are free to act, behavior is a matter of choice, and that people have an unlimited potential for growth and development. Pretty modern thinking there. I mean, I think this probably underlies my entire philosophy of learning and teaching today. You might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of human need. The pyramid graphic for this particular concept is perfect because these 2 lower sections, the psychological needs and the safety needs, are critical to our well-being. If we don't have those, we are not going to be dealing with our friends, we're not going to have a good self-image, and we're sure as heck not going to be moving forward to improve ourselves. We looked a little at learning modalities, the learning preferences, and you're going to actually take 3 inventories this week to see basically, more or less, how you learn: visual, auditory, reading-based, or kinesthetic. We looked at Howard Gardner, the envelope pusher, that cute picture of him, and his multiple intelligences. Very interesting way of looking at how people learn and think. We looked at Paulo Freire, and my video of Paulo Freire is in D2L, so you can pause it and read some of those slides that maybe went by too quickly. But he believed in participatory education, critical consciousness, and education as empowerment. What a radical. So these are some of the approaches you're going to read about in Parrish: the natural approach, competency-based education, communicative language teaching, whole language, content-based instruction, participatory approach, project-based learning, and learner-centered instruction. Different program types you'll be looking at: survival English, civics content, citizenship, intergenerational family literacy, where moms and their young toddlers are learning English together. Work readiness and workplace ESL, pre-academic ESL, and the integrated skills, which pre-academic ESL would be just kind of basic conversation, basic literacy, basic fluency, but not really geared towards moving up towards, say, a high school diploma in English. When a learner decides to do that, then they're getting into adult basic education and secondary ed. And then there's also distance learning, teaching online, where these screencast-o-matics could be a very powerful teaching tool. Different classroom types. There are single-level classes where students, all the learners have been tested within a specific level range, and everybody's more or less the same level, or multi-level classes where you're teaching levels of 2 or 3 levels at the same time. Very challenging. You might be teaching in a one-on-one small group lab setting or even one-on-one tutoring. Now look at the tutor in both of these pictures. Same guy, right? But notice he's sitting with the students. He's not standing up in front of them. He's not lording over them. He's sitting down next to them. And that's a very powerful dynamic in a lab setting. We want to avoid that cookie-cutter approach by learner-centered instruction, and remembering that we are all a mixture of learning preferences, modalities, and intelligences. We are all a fruit salad, right? So learner-centered instruction works so well in adult education because students take an active role in their learning process. And I love this quote: learners will better understand, acquire, and retain knowledge when they are given opportunities to manipulate and build on their own experiences. How aligned is that with the principles of adult learning? So the teacher has the challenge to stop being the all-knowing, pontificating sage on the stage and becoming a guide on the side. In other words, become a learning facilitator. What's more meaningful for you as a learner? What somebody tells you or what you discover for yourself? And that is the premise of learner-centered instruction. Key terms this week: schema, what we already know about a topic, and how what our previous experiences are with that topic. Your warm-up activities can activate schema. Have students talk about a picture. What's happening? What can they already say about the new topic? Here you'll find out what vocabulary they already know and you don't have to teach. Have them describe previous experiences with the subject. You're trying to link new learning with their previous knowledge, and it will help personalize the learning experience for them. Our other key term was scaffolding, which is a structure or support that helps students perform a task that would otherwise be difficult for them to accomplish. Scaffolding in ESL instruction is so important. It's important in language learning all across the board. Students build new skills upon old skills. You're tailoring to the needs of the student, and this supports a deeper level of learning because the student is much more engaged with the learning event and less worried about what he or she can't do. Types of scaffolding: activating schema, getting that background knowledge already active and out front, using pictures and other visuals, realia, outlines, a word wall or a word bank that's always visible. Students can always look at that wall and find that key vocabulary they need to know. Sentence starters, fill in the blanks activities, graphic organizers, and language experience approach. It is not a crutch. Scaffolding is not a crutch. Think about the skills that your learner needs that he or she doesn't have 100% right now, and then think about what supports can you provide that learner to get to that 100%. But it is short-term assistance. She won't need them forever. Okay, the wiki. Now, wikis are usually free for educational institutions. If you're a teacher, I think you can set up a free wiki. Otherwise, I think that it's paid. But, you could use a blog as well, similar to a wiki. But this is one that I created with my classmates at CSU. You're going to be going to this page this week. It's a timeline of learning theorists, and just pick one person who interests you and read up about him or her. There is one woman in there. And then you're going to go to the Padlet. You should have already received an invitation via email to participate in this Padlet, but you don't have to do it yet. Padlet is a great little bulletin board application, free, and think of it, it's a place where we can brainstorm. So this is kind of like a discussion. You can use it like a discussion room. I'm using it this week as kind of a brainstorming session. I want you to tell me who you read about and why that person resonates with you. And then you can also write comments on your classmates. So it is a lot like a discussion group. Your homework this week, Chapter 2, the Independent Study Course Learner-Centered Instruction. It's only about 14 pages. You don't have to do the activities in there. Just read the text. 3 learning style inventories. They do call them learning style inventories, learning modality inventories, and bring those results to class on February 10th. Talk about a theorist on the Padlet, go into the weekly discussion, and write in your reflective journal. Oops. Let me go back to my snipe. There is a recap and reflection form in D2L if you want to use it. You don't have to. It's a Word document. It's just like the reflection ticket that I give you in class. But if you want to use that at the end of the week to help you write your reflective journal, you are more than welcome to do that. And with that, I'll come back into the picture and say, so happy to have you in class. I'll see you in D2L. Bye-bye.